the mother and the father of the Adidas Super Shoe line.
How early was it that you were like, okay, no, this is on here. This might be the day.
The feat is, yes, the physical feat, but more than anything, the mental feat.
One of the maybe most special moments in not only running history, but maybe sports history. To work on the next generation of shoes.
It's a very hungry team.
We are definitely not running out of neither motivation nor gas. We will not stop.
Do you think this insane rate of innovation can keep up?
The honest answer is like, I think, I don't know, but I want to find out. 99% is still the athlete.
Ultimately, we are in a game to create those beautiful moments. Sebastian's Sub 2 is a moment that will stay there forever.
The problem with Everest is there's only one of them. Now what comes next?
Welcome back to Pioneers, where we go behind the curtain of the greatest experiences on the planet and speak to the people who designed them and made those moments that we all remember so much. Today, I'm unbelievably privileged to say we are in the Innovation Lab at Adidas HQ in Herzog in Germany, and the room where most of the most incredible technology in running has been produced. And we're speaking today to Marc Makowski and to Patrick Nava, who are the mother and the father of the Adidas Super Shoe line, and especially the Pro Evo 3, worn by Sabastian and Kajelcha, the two athletes to break 2 hours at London. Marc is the SVP of Creative Direction Innovation, and Patrick is the General Manager of Running. So they are two of the people really defining running culture, the running innovation and technology in the space, and so excited to get to have a conversation with them today.
Marc, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me. We were discussing just before who would be the mother and the father of the Evo Pro 3 that obviously broke all the world records, and was told you were very much the mother, Patrick. Why do you say that Patrick was the mother?
I think, like it was said, Patrick definitely cared a lot for this project, and I would say he was also the original idea of getting us onto that journey and kind of like bringing two super ambitious targets together by saying, yes, it should be the lightest of our top performing running shoes ever, and at the same point in time, the best performing. So I give him the credit for that idea, and that's why I think he somewhat is the mother of the project.
He's a stricter father.
You also need someone that makes sure that it's happened.
I mean, it was obviously the most insane week, a day that will probably the only day really in my running lifetime that will 100% go down in history. I want to, Patrick, take you back to week 4, where I saw you surrounded by
Not
the happiest Boston Marathon Monday, where I think it was the first time in as long as I can remember where there weren't Adidas people on runners on the podium across those core areas, and to go 6 days later and go and do something which frankly not many people thought was going to be possible. Talk to me through those 6 days from the Boston on the Monday to that insane time.
Well, that's it. So the Boston was definitely a bit disappointing. I think we actually had the third nail, if I'm not mistaken. However, not probably where we wanted to be. We knew the competition was stiff, both from an athlete side as well as from a product side. We also knew what was about to happen in London. Of course, you can't predict a win or a world record, not even less a sub 2, right? But we knew we were launching this shoe. We knew we had some of our strong runners in the race there. So I think when you look at, I would look at it like almost like as a football season, right? You're not going to draw the conclusion of the whole season based on the result of a single weekend. You look at the whole season and you say like, hey, did we do well or did we not? Now we're at halftime, so I would say I'm pretty happy with how we got so far, right? Not only like because of the records, but if you take, I think the top 100 races in the first half, we won 50% of those, or our athletes did, which means you take all the other brands, you put them together, they won as much as we did. Number one, we broke 6 world records as well, so like pretty decent first half. And so I would put it more in the perspective that single week of like, okay, like first half of 2026. So you take that single data point, put it in perspective, and you're like, okay, let's wait next weekend, and then I'll draw a summary of what the major marathons were and the broader races in the first half of 26. So disappointing, but not like heart-shattering in that sense, right?
And then because I think we were all expecting, given that everything had gone on with Seb and the program for Berlin, I think we all expected it was going to be full tilt at Berlin rather than it happening that week. Like, how much with the launch of launch of the shoe, everything which was going on that week, how early was it that you were like, okay, no, this is on here as far as like this might be the day?
I mean, we, like you said, the work with Sebastian happened already was long term in the making. And I would say Berlin last year, we were already convinced that we can go very, very fast. Obviously, again, analyzing his performance back then and realizing that he was able to go through those 2:02.16 at 27 degrees was insane. What we also then saw, we still had a plan simply because of the nature of Berlin, that we said like, hey, Berlin is the fastest one. We will still kind of like focus on this one. But we also knew the race is on for sub 2. And then obviously we have been working with Sebastian throughout the entire year, multiple trips, him being here, us being with him and Claudio in Kenya, and obviously understanding his physical performance or level of fitness, where we realized, okay, he's definitely kind of like super, super strong. We knew obviously he responds very well to the product, kind of like involving him at every stage of that development journey. And slowly but surely we built that confidence also then in the conversation with Claudia and with Sebastian to also make sure that ultimately it all goes down, is he confident or is he bold enough to say, yes, I want to address sub 2? And then obviously we realized towards London, again, weather is also one conversation, course obviously is one conversation, and we knew he will be fast. We also knew that course record is for sure something they want to go after. And then obviously within the actual race, we saw he just had it back then. And everything came together. And he was also, again, he was bold enough and brave enough, in particular in the second half of the marathon, to really go after it. So this was, very, like you said, one of the maybe most special moments in not only running history, but maybe sports history.
And I think the switch was actually, and Mark briefly alluded to it, is like the change in his mental attitude towards facing 2, right? I think we went from over a year ago, in which a year and a half ago, we weren't officially talking even to him about it because Claudio was like, no, let's not put the pressure on him. Then eventually it started to be like, maybe I am the guy who can beat it, to then at some points like, no, I got this. And to me, this is a little bit of sort of a man on the moon, Roger Bannister kind of thing, right? Like the feat is, yes, the physical feat, but more than anything, the mental feat. And I think that is going to like open the gates for, I guess, other people also to get sub 2, which is still going to be a phenomenal physical feat. But I think just that mental roadblock that I think was in the minds of most of the elite runners so far is now probably gone with that.
And when you take that man on the moon, and I agree, I think it'll be a Roger Bannister moment where just suddenly it's like, oh, okay, it's gone, let's go. Not particularly for you, it's obviously complete lifer at Adidas have built an amazing legacy in as you've said, dominate the super shoe industry now, and you've obviously built that legacy out. What was emotionally like for you on that Sunday, seeing the sort of culmination of, because as much as it's a day for Sebastian, like it is the culmination of, you talk about running as F1, like that's your Toto Wolff moment, right? Like what was it like watching that race? Where were you?
We actually didn't necessarily have a Total Wolff kind of like the moment.
Way less glamorous.
Yes, way less glamorous.
So Adidas don't pay you what? Toto can wish. There's no paddocks, like, you know.
The London Marathon is obviously not an Adidas sponsor race. So also like Patrick and I obviously watched the race like thousands of other people along the track, or like being at like London Bridge in that particular space, round about like half marathon kind of like distance, together with a few members of the team, and obviously waiting for the runners to come across, first the female runners and then obviously the male runners, and then literally kind of like, doesn't sound too glamorous, but watching the remainder of the race on an iPad with a pretty shitty feet in that sense. We then had the chance to watch the runners again around about kilometer 38, 39 in that sense, so when it really kind of like got towards crunch time. But I would say obviously in particular, the sequence of events was pretty crazy. It was almost like if it was scripted in that sense. We saw Tigges kind of like being in that leading group of 3, then winning it, breaking the women's only world record. And around about by that time, we already knew that the guys were getting faster. We saw, okay, it's on 2:01 at round about like half marathon distance. Then they went into a 2 hour 30 seconds kind of like race. And literally the next time we checked kind of like the projection after Tigges has won it, it said something about like 1:59:53 or something like that, and you could see how they kind of like were speeding up, and then it became a bit surreal.
Yeah.
So we had literally that first celebration around that little mobile phone with the team when Tigist won, and then it was all like, and I remember like even on the last kilometer, Patrick was, as the mother, he was still very kind of like, don't get too crazy too early, like that's not good, like stay calm. It was like everyone was like excited because people realized it's gonna happen. It is gonna happen, no? And then again it was just like wild, or with Sebastian, then Yomef, or it was literally everything like you would have scripted.
If you were to record like there's this group of like, I don't know, 10, 15 people huddled around like a phone this big, right in a bend, and there's all these other people watching the race, and then the other guys kept passing through, and at some point here there's like huge shouts. Like, we probably gave a couple of heart attacks to bystanders there. It's like, what are these idiots doing here? And then I think we had it from the first pub.
And then go find a pint. You go really surprised. Go and enjoy yourself.
Up. Good time.
What was when you think about now what comes next, and obviously you've had this insane day, trying to go on and push the next limit. That this is the problem with Everest is there's only one of them. Like one of the problems with running now is I'm a bit worried is like, does the romance of road running, particularly on the men's side, go through now that two has gone in like an official race? Like, how do you put your team together around what comes next and the next amazing one of these?
I think it's more symbolic in the sense like after the race is before the race, and I think the mentality of this team, I think it's a very hungry team, but also very humble team who's willing to work. Like I think everybody, I mean, already by London, but even more after that, was ready with its mind about, okay, what are the next tweaks that we're going to do on this, right? And then what are other ambitious things we can go after, such as, you know, a sub 2:10 for women, right? Like there's plenty of other stuff that we can go after, or even just proving that it wasn't a fluke, right? So it wasn't just like it happens at only once. Like I think once you start proving like this can be broken as a barrier repeatedly with a multitude of athletes, and you say, okay, now we brought humanity on the whole at a whole different racing level.
Maybe just adding one thing, or like you said, it's not a finite game, or it's not a thing where you've won the World Cup or you've won the Champions League. And I think, again, that's something the team needs to kind of like be at ease with it, that it's not like this. Also, you need to make sure that you find a good balance between keeping the level of ambition, motivation high, and then take the fact that we have proven it as something that kind of like pushes us even further on. And I think the beauty of that is, because to your point, will that go away because of sub 2 is now being broken? I think maybe from a pure mainstream way of looking at it, instantly maybe, question mark. But I would say, like, if you look at even like what happened in London next year, like the amount of people subscribe for that. So I think that the way of like what marathon has become, I don't think this will ever go away actually in the foreseeable future. I think the beauty for us is, and again, like something that motivates the team a lot, we kind of like put this team together from an innovation perspective, in particular around that idea of what does it mean to deliver only the best for an athlete. And I think you take so much motivation and momentum from working with the likes of a Tigist, a Sebastian, and a Yomef, and you start to then you kind of like start to engage with their objectives, or their motivations become your motivations. And I think this is where obviously Sebastian was quite vocal what he wants to do in Berlin, kind of like this year again. Also, like that gives us the next thing to work on to, and maybe just to give, like Patrick said, or like the before and after thing. We had obviously on the Tuesday after London, we had the 3 athletes here on campus. The very same team that was celebrating in London was already again down here in the lab, because we had 5 of our 100-kilometer kind of like athletes in order to work on the next generation of shoes. So that shows the level of commitment and push in that space. So we are definitely not running out of neither motivation nor gas in that sense.
Love it. And when you look at these incredible shoes and how much they've changed the game on at the front of the pack, something you've spoken about quite a lot is this F1 link. But the difference in running is that, like, not everyone, I don't get to go and drive an F1 car, whereas like everyone does for a price tag get to go and enjoy these. Like, I've been obsessed with my Pro 4s for the last since they first came out. How do you think about this whole evolution of building it for to help you to run crazy times, but then also thinking about that like everyday athlete and yeah, are you thinking when you're thinking in the lab about the average runner me?
Yes.
Or is it all about that guy?
Yes, within a framework, which is like, this is always a concept car, right? This is like your Formula One. This is where all the latest innovations, every single little tweak is experimented and pushed to the limit, right? And then we can think about, okay, what out of these different ingredients, different technologies can then be applied and make sense to apply to, I would say, an increasingly democratic application, right? I would say this is a like, you get the most out of the shoe if you're the Formula One driver, like really, really an elite athlete, right? Otherwise, we like, if you're a fast runner, you have, and some of our pros use them too, like you have the Pro 4s, it's still a very fast shoe. And then there's other applications. You've seen other models that come out where it becomes more and more democratic, but that still take cues from what we developed here. Of course, different application because it's a different use case, a different experience. But a lot of what is new, experimental, looking forward happens here.
And maybe, again, adding a few things, there's also an element of one thing is obviously, yes, you test it with the athletes here in the lab, and there's a lot of information that you gather from that, or how to build and better basically build the perfect version of that shoe. There's also an element of what happens when you test that product yourself. Or this is another thing that kind of like our founder back then put in as a principle of like, test your own products yourself.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I keep on telling my team. Also, I'm also obsessed with just testing this shoe in order to get an understanding of like, okay, how do I need to kind of like put that feedback that I get from an athlete into perspective? Or I'm not the F1 driver. I would maybe say I can maybe drive a touring car. That's when it comes to running. But I think that's interesting. Also, then say like, okay, what does that mean? To then also, to your point, build it into perspective of what do we take as elements from that shoe that maybe we use in other products, but then also the general learnings. And one of the things which is very interesting, obviously we talk a lot about foam, for example, and like how you look at this, the lightweight versus the energy return it drives. And then again, we went through lots of exercises with broader running demographics, where we looked at everyday people and said, like, okay, what makes a joyful running experience? And then you start to realize, okay, some of those things matter to them as well, or not that extreme. You don't need to talk about ultimate lightweight, but lightweight matters in the sense, or deformation matters, but not in the sense of necessarily energy return, but it's this mix of the cushioning piece and the energy return driving that comfort, joyful running experience. So that's where we obviously always kind of like live in that space of how do we bridge between the two worlds and not look at the one versus the other as two completely separate things. And I think that's also like where the power and the magic then arrives, because then you start to also challenge the way of how you would normally build for an everyday runner, and you would build differently for an elite athlete. To start, it becomes very powerful when you start to make those two worlds merging.
It's fascinating. And when you look at where that magic arrives and how that magic happens, is this insane development that you've watched over and has happened over the last 5-10 years and has seen all of these records tumble and that kind of stuff, is that going to slow down? I mean, like, this thing almost weighs absolutely nothing. Like, it feels like making it even, like, I'm sure there's something you can find somewhere, but I don't know how you possibly would. Like, do you think this insane rate of innovation can keep up, or do you think a lot of the innovation that we found has played through?
The honest answer is like, I think, I don't know, but I want to find out. And if there's a limit at all, right? And I would say the industry over the last, let's call it 10 years, like since the first super shoe, has been very much focused on footwear, and there's still work that we're doing there, and we figure it out now as we develop the next couple of iterations. This one that we can still become better. Then there's everything that happens like on top of the foot itself, right? And you've seen a couple of innovations that both Sebastian as well as Yomif were wearing in London. And then I think what is also being professionalized, also looking at other sporting industries, is the before, during, after the race, which is not necessarily has to do with equipment. So I think there's still many pockets, and here we're really looking at marginal improvements. If you start putting them together, they can still give you big results in the end. So that's why I say, like, I think there's still a lot of potential.
And I would say, like, I think there's two ways to look at this. Like, to Patrick's point, there's to look at the shoe in isolation, kind of. And again, I think the weight target is very obvious because you kind of like put that on. As we said, he's the mother of that, so it's his idea.
Pathetically small baby.
I don't necessarily say that this becomes an area where, from the the weight of that shoe, you can't kind of like shave too much off, you know. Will you find other ways to improve the overall performance of the shoe? It's a different conversation. Also, like that's definitely something we will not stop kind of like exploring. But then to Patrick's point, the holistic way, in particular when we're talking about elites, the holistic way how you assess running performance definitely has not only the pre-perform and post moment, but then obviously also the combination of the shoe as well with the apparel that you wear. And there are obviously lots of opportunities that, again, we've had two of the main technologies being endorsed in London, with Sabastian looking at the Clima 3D apparel, kind of like looking at a totally new level of how you help the athlete to kind of like compete with the heat. And then the other piece was the OMIF wearing the TechFit suit, where kind of like you give an athlete a totally different kind of like posture opportunity across those 42 kilometers. And that, again, also enhancing the running performance significantly. So again, if you explore all the avenues across that, I would say, and again, like we go back to the famous marginal gains kind of like conversation. If you kind of like put marginal gains in each of those areas, there is an opportunity to go further. And to Patrick's point, we're definitely very curious to find out and won't stop there.
When you look at, because it was amazing looking at, it does feel like that innovation is kind of moving up the body as far as like it sort of obviously started with the plates and how that moved through, and then it's sort of like really developing in that way. Perhaps an unfair question, but it'd be bad for the architect of two of these people of this current wave. As you all know, there are obviously those people who say some of the beauty in running is being able to compare across generations and across periods of time, and then the innovation and the work that you guys have done has meant that it's contributed to empowering these athletes and really ending up in a situation where you can break all these records. When you look at the impact and the legacy of the super shoe, I kind of relate it to what's happening with AI, this incredible technology which has achieved so many extraordinary things. Are there any moments where you missed the whatever Tinder shoes and the plimsolls of that side, or do you think this is always an essential part of running which has been there?
I think it's always been there in terms of technology. Again, we operate within the limits and regulation of World Athletics, right? So we're very much confirmed.
Don't piss off Seb.
Exactly. So very mindful of those, number one. Number two, I think technology has been a part of not just running, but any sport, right? Like tennis is not played with wooden rackets anymore. Football has changed in terms of like the ball is...
There's no leather
right? Or the cleats for that matter, they're not really leather cleats right now, I would say, right? So it's a little bit, I'd say almost ludicrous to say like, oh, it should all be like in the first Olympics in 1896. Like, why? Like, and there's two components to this. I think the advancement of technology changes, of course, or affects how the performance in races turns out, but also the training of it, right? So that's also a big component. People sometimes don't consider like it not only affects how fast you run a race, but how hard, how often you're able to train, and therefore it's a whole different road to those sort of races. And lastly, I would say 99% is still the athlete, right? So that's equipment that helps. But at the end of the day, I think you see a general professionalization also of the sport of running, again, with everything that happens before, during, and after. And so to limit it to or super elevate the impact of the shoe, I think it's a little bit reducing it to something very simple just because it's obvious.
I would maybe just also add on this. I think there's a lot of people who are getting very romantic about sport and the past of sport, and I fully get this. You were joking about the results of the German. I thankfully experienced that moment when we had in a different Twitter. Also, like this is definitely something that is a great sporting experience, and then again, someone who leads an innovation team, and not being someone that is a scientist or engineer by trade. I always struggled when people kind of like glorify innovation for the sake of innovation, or that is not the point. Or the point is we use advancement from a technology aspect, from a material aspect, the way of how we can build a product for an athlete in order to elevate the performance. Or ultimately, we are in a game to create those beautiful moments. Or Sebastian's Sub 2 is a moment that will stay there forever. And that kind of like beautifies running. Or that's like the purest form of like what running from a performance and elite perspective is. But then again, it also is, how do we inspire more people to run? Or like, again, we said about like London becomes a 2-day marathon next year because of so many people. I think it's 3% of the UK population that wanted to run the London Marathon, which is amazing. The amount of kids, young people that we inspire through that. And I would always use innovation, technology, advancement in general for us to really inspire more people to kind of like have beautiful sport experiences.
Maybe to be a little bit facetious on this, I would encourage anyone who thinks this gives you a really unfair advantage to run, let's say 400 meters at Sebastian's pace and just like the most basic shoe you can find, then put this one on. It's still going to be hard.
You're still not going to do it.
Probably going to run a little bit faster, but it's still going to be hard. So that gives you an idea. Okay, yeah, it's the athlete who does a lot of that.
But no, I so agree, and I think this. I'm going to clip this up and sort of send it to everyone who has this view. Because sadly, I have to tomorrow. Well, not personally, but the company is going to be emailing those millions of people from the London Marathon telling they didn't get in, which is always a bad day in my year. So I'm not looking forward to that tomorrow. But one of the things that I've found is I've definitely run more marathons over the last 3-4 years because of shoes that you guys have built and designed and developed, because the ability to be able to like back stuff up and train to be able to go and put in that volume is so huge there. A lot of the people who we will be talking to are race organizers and race directors, and we obviously, it's funny hearing your story about watching Sabastian on your phone, because there's a hilarious video of Hugh, the London Marathon CEO, also watching it on his phone in a park, like not actually being there at the finish line because he was coming from the start. When you think about working with races and working with the people participating in those races more generally, you're associated with a huge number of massively iconic races: Peachtree Road races next weekend, Boston Marathon, Berlin Marathon, Cape Town. How do you think about which races you want to work with, and how do you go through that process?
From a strategic point of view, mostly I think we're looking at races that add something from the conversation and have something authentic, right? It doesn't really matter if it's like a race where you have 10,000 of people or maybe just a couple of thousand, right? Like, as long as it's authentic and it provides an experience that is really authentic and speaks to the population of runner that they intend to speak to, then it's an interesting race, right? Because again, yes, I think you see, or a lot of the visibility for the key brands is given for the athletes on the starting line, but the majority of the people we talk to are the 99.9% that come after that, right? And these people probably, their first race will not be the London Marathon, right? They'd be like a park run, a 5K, a 10K somewhere else, right? So that's why these for me are like, call it like the bread and butter of what running is actually about, and these are the ones that are really, really interesting as well, right? Because they provide something really authentic, really true to the sport of running, and they're interesting because of that.
And when you look at, I mean, you've obviously had the most extraordinary rise to one of the biggest jobs in running globally, and when we speak to a lot of those races, they're like, we would love to work with Adi, like that would be a dream come true, but like, I don't have Patrick's mobile number. Don't worry, I'm not going to start handing it out. But
like, I can give it to you.
Yeah. Sure. We'll put it on your Instagram. That'll be fine. Yeah. How do those people like try and get the attention of someone like Adidas? Like, how do you really, if you're not a major or whatever?
I think, don't come for the sponsorship, right? Like, just the point is not to put the Three Stripes logo on something. It's like, what can we do together that speaks in an authentic way and adds to the conversation about running? Again, small or bigger, it actually doesn't matter. Like, if you're authentic, if you're true to running, if you do something really valuable to the runners in the race, then there's probably a good reason for us to talk, right? And then sometimes it's a local organization, sometimes it's the regional one, sometimes it's directly us. Like, we're interested in sports and the truth in sports in general. So
what's something that you wished race organizers and event organizers understood about working with massive brands, which you feel like they get wrong?
Think about the year, not just a single day of the race. Like, how does the holistic pre-post effort look like? Right?
Because when it comes to the race day, it is weird. Like, even looking at London,
just the event.
Yeah, it's not just the event day; it's everything else which
Yeah.
goes on around it.
Yeah.
And maybe the one thing is with the massive brand is also, obviously I get it from an doesn't matter. It's not a running specific race organizer topic. Every sporting kind of like entity obviously looks at their product. In our world, we've got lots of different products competing around kind of like attention at the same point in time or across different sports. And I think just have a bit of empathy for that, and based on that, try to understand, okay, how do you position your product uniquely against all the other stuff that is out there?
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And when you think about that year-round participant experience and thinking about the athlete as a real year-round person, obviously what you've done with Boston is been extraordinary because it's something which is just like a lifelong journey. How much has that whole like telling of the jacket and the fact that everyone wears that year round being a massive part of what made that race so successful? Or is it like, it's the Boston Marathon, it's always going to work, it's the most iconic race?
That's one specific, and there's many other things that go with it. Like I could think about, so one thing, for example, that Mexico City Marathon does really well. They have they call it the splits. It's a lead up of shorter races, like leading up to that. I would say 80-90% of people who end up running Mexico City Marathon do all of this. So again, this whole experience that come before, right? Memorabilia, one of that, the hospitality goes around it. Like just, it's hard to compare Boston with other Americans just because it's such a, the whole city is around it. It's a smaller and closed environment that works for them. Other ones are great as well. Berlin has an incredible atmosphere. And also there's the history, what the marathon meant for the city itself. So it's like, find it what makes your race unique and bring that to life.
Yeah, it's extraordinary seeing what Mark and Jürgen have achieved with Berlin, where it just to like talk about like resonating with the exact place which it is and the authenticity which exists there. I don't think it gets much more authentic than the relationship which is there. What are the metrics that you're mainly looking at when it comes to actually genuinely making a race really worthwhile?
I think participation is one.
Yeah.
The second one is not necessarily the volume of conversation, but it's the quality of conversation around it, right? So you see people engage, people see it's an authentic race, and that's also important. Like how many people do you get there? How cool do these people think the actual race is? And I would say like the length of engagement as well, like what happens before, during, after the race, right? Like is it a one-off and then these people won't care about your race after, or is there actually they're excited in the lead up and then they're still like connected to the race after?
Yeah, which I think goes back to this idea of what you said earlier about like how authentic is a race. So I think ultimately like what's the character of a race? Or like fastest is one thing, but what is it that you want to stand for? And I think that is an important piece for us.
And when you're looking at building, you've built such long-term partnerships and things which are there. Like if you want someone who's going to come in and build a really, really long-term partnership with them, if there's one data point that you're going to look at and say like, okay, I care about this number specifically moving, because some of these races are going to be trying to work towards a partnership with Adi, what is the one number that you'd be looking at trying to move over time?
It was an NPS score for the race, right? Yeah, that would be the one.
I love that. And it sort of speaks to I think there's every 10 years in running, I feel like a new term gets bandied around. It's like, it's all about X. And it's sort of like whatever the last was sort of like community, and everything's about community and everyone talks about it completely different ways. Now it's culture. Like everyone just uses culture the entire time. Like what is like running culture like mean to you and contribute to this conversation now? And like what do you think that actually is at its heart?
Culture is interesting as a term, right? So I think generally, and I'm not sure, like I think if we're to look on Wikipedia, it would say culture is the collection of symbols, rituals, norms, and values that go around in the society, right? Now, like you could take this whole collection of pre-post during race, like run crews, equipment, all the coffee chats, the people in it, right? And I think it becomes culture when from within a close community, it starts affecting what happens outside of it. So that's why like people talk a lot about running culture, because running culture has started to spill out into what is normal everyday culture. And I think it's hard to box it into one thing. You just see more people participating in running, being interested in running, participating in racing, and also in the aesthetics of what classic running look is spilling out in what people wear in their daily life. So that's when you can say like, okay, running culture has spilled over into mainstream, therefore it is affecting culture.
That's a good point, because there used to be a time where running as a sport was a sport for a very niche group of nerds in that sense. And then there were lots of others. I come from like playing football, where running was a thing in order to get to a certain level of fitness, or where it was a means to something. I think obviously to Patrick's point, and I think that is where a term like culture is obviously sometimes maybe almost a bit misleading in that sense. But I would say people, and I think that's again the beauty of, to Patrick's point earlier, when he's like, why does it make sense for us to speak with certain different levels of races? Or it's about like, how can we portray what running can mean to you? And I think again, like it's that's also like similar. I think there are two maybe in that sense global sports, or running because it's so simple, everyone can run in that sense, or different levels, etc. That's You can do it in different group forms, and I think this is also beauty. Like I've got one of our boys, he's now 13 years old, and he starts to kind of like kill me over time.
It's gonna get worse.
Yeah, it's gonna get worse.
It's not going to improve.
But again, like that's a totally different kind of like experience. And in our relationship, is also a totally different element. When he says like, "Dad, you need to kind of like speed up," yeah, it turns that relationship a bit upside down. And that's totally cool. And I think that's the stuff that made running so much more interesting over the last few years versus you are the one that runs on your own. And I would say like the other sport I was mentioning is football, simply because again it's so simple. And I think the simplicity of those sports, and then people starting to embrace that and embrace the impact it can be, I think that leads to culture. Then in the end, culture becomes a consequence of that.
And is culture always transitory in the way that like we're in this moment now where we have this crazy boom in running? Like we talked about London Marathon numbers. We're going to be launching Bike America Chicago Marathon. We think that will probably double in size this year. Like there's a lot of growth that's happening. Is running culture going to be one of those things that like comes and goes and we migrate onto the next thing? Is it going to be like cricket in India or football in London or whatever it is, where actually like this is just becoming more and more ingrained and that sticks? Like, how do you think about this, both in terms of the positioning at Adi, but also like what you see in it?
Good question. So if I have to answer from a business point of view and a participation point of view, there's no forecast that I am seeing that shows any slowing down. Yeah. Now everything comes a little bit in ebbs and flows, so I can't tell you how it's going to be in 10 years. But again, to the point, like if we look at the past 100 years, the sports that have grown constantly, right? And say like a constant rate of growth, football and running, right? Sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but always growing. What you also have, I think, with running is that in some markets or some regions, it's a very established sport. If you take North America, Europe, right? Very established. There's other one where it's exploding because there was just not a lot of people running. If you take Latin America, is one of our fastest growing emerging markets is Asia, a lot, right? So there's still a lot of, I would say, untapped spaces, which eventually also are going to enter the cultural conversation again. And then it's going to be interesting to see like how people in these places interpret on their own the sport of running and how will it influence them, what happens globally. So I think you will also see that wave coming. How is it going to influence the overall global? I don't know, but I'm really curious to find out.
And the other pieces, maybe just to add, like again, we see healthy, active lifestyle is something that will again grow. And even some of the booming sports, if you take hybrid training as an example, where obviously running is a very critical element of that. So I would say because of the very positive impact, and I think also like the massive impact running has got on your body, on how you feel, etc. I think that will be a natural driver in that sense, or where I don't think we can talk about a running boom anymore in that sense, because it's almost like there isn't, to Patrick's point, there's almost an evergreen of a running boom. Yeah. And it comes maybe with slightly different pushes at certain points, and maybe also like some geographies that have a slightly different take. But I can't foresee any slowdown on that side.
Yeah,
which is good for Patrick.
It's quite good for us as well. That's a really it's sort of, we were talking about high rocks before, and yeah, I don't know whether Chris or Mo would like to say it's a running race with a few lifts. We all know that it's a running race. It's a running race.
You can lose it and win it on the run. Right, the rest is there's an intro. Not really catch it. You redlining.
You just go.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask about the injury point, because you've obviously allowed loads of us, myself included, to set personal bests, and there is this a big part of that culture has been around racing and PBs and going hard and that kind of stuff. But there is also the wellness side that you speak about, and the health side and everything which is there. Like, this is perhaps unfair, but you guys have dominated the front and everything which is happening at the front of race. The innovation happening further in the back, a lot of where injury is this sort of problem and that kind of stuff, has sort of been secondary, at least in public profile, to the front of the stuff. Like, what's the plan around the middle of the pack and the back of the pack and how that plays out?
A couple of things here. First of all, a lot of the stuff that we learn here is also applicable in some shape or form to the broader population. And I would say the actually, if you take the average runner, is a person who runs 2 to 3 times a week between 3 and 5 kilometers per round, right? So, and they don't care at all about marathons. They don't even know who Sebastian is. Maybe they've seen it now, but like mostly they don't know, right? So again, the bread and butter of the running industry is that, right? we, in terms of Adidas, I think we realized a couple of years ago, okay, we needed to catch up on several fronts. After I would say the Ultra Boost hype, we deliberately decided to start from a racing focus, because that's a little bit our heritage, and that's one of the, I would say, the strong points that we have as a company on the whole. Because guess what, we're big. That doesn't allow us to be nimble as some of the smaller company or the vertical ones, but it means we can put a lot of resources into innovation, right? So starting from that just sets basically your North Star. And then you take what you learn there and say, what can be applied to the broader population? That's why you see models like Hyperboost Edge coming out here, where we take like racing form and then we apply for everyday use. And so guess what? Oh, people seem to like it a lot. And then people think about like also innovation just from a performance point of view. We think about, like, if you think about the mission of Adidas, which is through sports, we have the power to change life. And it just doesn't mean the top athlete. It means the broader population as well. I don't know if you've been paying attention to sort of what happened last week in Cannes, for example, right? We got an award for the Supernova Adaptive, which is the first shoe who's been designed specifically for people with disabilities, right? And that's where I think, again, it's almost a moral obligation that we have as a company because of the size we are. If we don't do it, then nobody else will. And like our hope is that we can bring as many people to this sport because it's simple and we really believe that it can improve people's lives. So if you say like the most visible part of what we do is definitely this. 80% of what we do, which is a little bit less visible, is on this other stuff.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And you talked about the challenger brand side there. And I think there was this period of time, I agree, it's not really a running boom to the same extent now, but in the early running boom, it was kind of all about the challenger brands as far as like the big super brands like the Adidas, the Nike sort of weren't there as much. You've obviously come back in and have had an amazing few months coming through and that kind of stuff. Like, how did you rebuild yourself to go and dominate in a space that had been dominated by like some smaller upstarts?
I think you have to first do a very honest check-in with yourself and with the runners you're serving. And then you take stock, it's like, oh, we're not doing that great. so very humbling. You start building it a little bit brick by brick, which is like, again, putting the athletes, any kind of athlete, at the center of what we do, whether it's with Marc together at the very elite or like going like to cities, to countries, or like to people who go like just on Saturdays around. It's like, hey, why are you running with brand X and not with Adidas? And like sometimes a little bit, it was hard to hear, like why. And then
what did you hear?
Well, I say like, oh, we didn't even know Adidas was making running shoes. Like 5 years ago when I stepped into the job, I was like, oh, okay, what? That's interesting. It makes sure the feedback. But again, feedback is feedback, right? And then you can listen and you can decide what to do with it, right? And you can put it to the side and whatever, I'm going to focus on the other. You say like, no, actually we have a problem here. So let's figure out how to very humbly like say like, okay, we got some work to do here, guys, and let's roll out our sleeves. And then it will take some time because, as you know, like developing running shoes, it's a little bit of an endeavor. It takes 2 years, 3 years. So like the reward will be down the road, but you know, I do believe that the caliber of the people in this company is such that like if you want to tackle a problem, we'll figure it out. And that was a little bit the mindset, you know, 5 years ago when we started this turnaround again. Just like be honest with where we are, and take action.
And I think to add one thing, or like you said it, running next to a sport like training, for example, was obviously one of those areas where a lot of grants popped up on. And there is a danger if you start to react to that you start to try to copy and beat 5 different brands, or which is not the point. Or for us, it is, and Patrick mentioned authenticity earlier. I think it's about like trying to understand, okay, what's the authentic way of Adidas into running? And again, knowing the history of our brand, knowing the size of our brand. And then again, going back to the idea of if your mission is to be the best sports brand in the world, you need to then kind of like create the evidence for it also. That's where for us it led to also like why it is important to kind of like achieve the records that Patrick mentioned earlier and the amount of wins, or because it's just very much true to our DNA, and take that as an angle by not saying we only do this, but obviously you start to create that exactly the moment, oh, you build running shoes, yeah, and actually very good ones, it does, if not the best ones. So I think kind of like use that angle from the top, and then kind of like obviously address the broader running population through that and so on. Again, like do this in our way of how we would be doing this as a brand versus trying to kind of like run after a lot of others that are in the simulation field.
It's something you've done unbelievably well. Like, as far as I think that something we always got asked by investors early on, is like, oh, how are you going to like appeal to the elites in the everyday? And I think what you've done is that everyone in the everyday sees themselves in the elite something which they're doing and something which is there, and it's been extraordinary.
I mean, that's maybe just to build on that. That's the beauty of our industry. Or like our industry is built on a hero to halo model. And of course, there have been other brands coming in that ignored that because they also, quite frankly, didn't have access to the hero. But again, everyone is inspired and aspires to be a hero. Or like, again, like I've got 2 boys who still dream about becoming pro football players. That is amazing. And I think us cultivating that dream, us making sure that people can dream longer in that sense is amazing.
Well, Germany needs the next generation to come through now, so yeah, it should be good. I'm
not so sure.
You got your 40-year-old captain to retire, so we'll see how it goes. Love to go to some rapid fire just for the last 5 minutes. So for each of you, best sports experience you've ever had?
Own or witnessed?
Either, both.
I mean, honestly, the sub 2 was pretty. It's a hard one to beat.
I could say the same, but like witnessed, I would say having the opportunity with our 2 boys kind of like watch Germany at home at the Euros, beating Denmark 2-0, an epic game. That was like pretty cool. And then on an experience level, I would say running your first 5K run with your son is also pretty cool.
That must be unreal. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Favorite finish line, any race, anywhere in the world?
Berlin for the speed and energy, UTMB for the atmosphere.
London. For having done it myself, and then obviously the experience where I was sub 2.
Yeah, that's got to be a pretty special memory from going from there now. What do you think AI is going to change most about your jobs over the next couple of years?
Speed of development. Just because I think you can design, virtually test much faster. Up to a certain point, because at some point you got to start building physical shoes. But I would say the amount of iterations, the speed of iterations is going to accelerate.
So the 3 years that this one took, how long do you reckon future generations are going to come down to?
I would also now be surprised about your answer.
I don't know.
I also want to know.
Hard to say yet. Like, we're very much at the beginning of this, so I'd be hard pressed to say like by how much.
What do you think with your day today?
I think what I like about it is I think it creates an infinity of opportunities. Because again, a lot of the things that you need to build or simulate, etc., you can literally with the AI get into like lots of different opportunities straight away. And I think that is very exciting in terms of like trying to exactly to the point, like what are the new solutions that we're going to build? So it almost removes any barriers.
Do you think we'll be at a point where these are personally designed for each of our feet in the same way as they are for Sebastian?
Potentially, I see some material limitations in that, right? There's some stuff where you still need like the big supplier engine behind it, right? Like it's hard to, let's say, like you get to a point where you get 3D printed. We're not at a stage right now where we can 3D print materials that have this kind of performance. So until you are there, right, we can kind of make it at home. No, I don't see like this going away.
But I think to the point of like this personalization aspect is one that is flying around as an ultimate ambition since decades. Our industry wasn't necessarily set up to do this. Or to Patrick's point, actually behind us we have 3D printed football as well as basketball boots that are tailored to individuals based on foot shape, based on what they need when it comes to cushioning profiles, etc. So I would say that space, I'm not saying that this is the running solution, but that space is one that is going to be.
Love it. Last couple, biggest theme in running over the next few years. Call it the next 3 years.
You go first.
I think just the increase in participation.
Yep.
And I think within that, fragmentation of consumer profiles. So how do you still cater and speak to many more different specialized sort of needs?
Yeah, love that. I massively agree with that. What's the one thing about the running industry, and this is the final question, that you feel like other people are scared to call out on it, that you think should be called out as being rubbish, that is spoken about often in the running industry?
Okay, right now, controversial one. I think right now you see many brands with nothing to do with running whatsoever coming into the space because it's sexy right now. I don't think if you're not coming in with the right expertise or offering something that's truly incremental to the experience of a runner, like you're just trying to take a piece of the pie without contributing to the conversation.
Love it.
And I would maybe say something similar. We spoke about culture. I would actually almost eliminate the term culture because it's for a lot of people an entry ticket into running, whilst you don't have anything to contribute to running.
Amazing. So turn up, do the work, build it actually with the athletes,
have
and
a
go and do
point
it. Have a point. Have 1 million.
Well, but then just showing up to the party.
Yeah, rather just go and try and take a bit of the profit. That's not as popular. Guys, thank you so much. It's been brilliant. Thank you for everything you've done for running. Thank you for what you've done for my running, but particularly what you've done with this year as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Pleasure. Thank you.
Can we buy one of these yet?
If you missed the first episode, it's with Hugh Brasher, who's the CEO of London Marathon Events, and the man behind that amazing day that we spent some time talking about with breaking all those world records. If you missed it, please do go and check it out.